All right.
We're back. We are live. We are going on again. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tom's Hardware. This EVGA news, Gordon and Paul and I have been talking after we ended our live stream where we were talking about Raptor Lake, and I'm like, hey, we should just go back on the air and talk about this EVGA business. And it's not just EVGA that we're talking about, because like this has huge ramifications. So like if EVGA is willing to take their ball and go home and close up shop, which what it seems to be what's happening, like what does that mean for Nvidia and AMD and the other graphics cards companies? Like, how bad are things if EVGA is closing up shop? And Paul and Gordon had some great thoughts, and like I was trying to keep up with them. But like, what does this mean? What are the ramifications?
I think this is just this first wave. This it's going to get really ugly. EVGA is, as much as they have diversified with motherboards and power supplies, they are still largely known for GPUs. But whatever the deal that they had with Nvidia, I'm sure they were like, we're not gonna make it here. But I can just see, if you think about it, other companies that are similarly sized, similar businesses to EVGA, they may not survive this wave, because this is an insane wave coming at all people in graphics. I mean, you were early in our talk, you were saying how many potential graphics cards are out there doing mining that could suddenly
Yeah,
be.
so the numbers are, I might have this wrong. I think it's 900 terahash per second is what was in the Ethereum network as of like 3 days ago. And that's all gone now. Now, to get 900 terahash per second, a single RTX 3080, we'll just make it nice and easy. Let's call it 90 megahash per second. So basically, you would need 10 million 3080 cards in order to get to 900 terahash per second. And so that means all of those cards that were doing Ethereum are now out of work. And over the past couple of years, from what I've seen, I would say 98%, 99% of GPUs that were mining cryptocurrency were mining Ethereum. And so now they're all out of work and they're looking for something else to do. And the companies who mined and made money last year, hey, what are we going to do? Like, I think you sell them. Like, I
Yes,
don't
they're
think
going
there's going to be another coin coming out anytime soon that's going to be like, oh yeah, it can sustain 10, 20 million GPUs mining 24/7 and using crap loads of power. And so they get sold on the secondhand markets. And in the meantime, Nvidia had pre-orders with TSMC for their ADA chips that are coming out, and TSMC made them prepay and they wouldn't let them back out. So like Nvidia was making all these high-end Ampere cards. Those are still in the channel trying to come out. Like it's going to be a bloodbath. And I think EVGA was trying to, like, there was probably some agreement that Nvidia was holding them to, saying you got to do this, you got to sell these cards. And EVGA went, we're going to lose tons of money. We're not a publicly traded company. Let's close up shop.
Yeah. And there's.
so
Go ahead.
okay. So when you look at it during the shortage, kind of expanding a little bit on what Jared was talking about, because really these vendors have problems coming from two directions. One, there's going to be a flood of cards coming into the used market, and that's going to kill the average selling price of the GPU. At the same time, what happens is this: in order to make your processor a single chip like this, takes about 2.5 months working its way through a semiconductor foundry. It takes forever. Intel's head of their global fab network, we were just talking about this. It takes several months. So GPUs are no different. When they order a GPU, from the day that they order it to the day that it's produced is a very long period of time, at least 2 months at a minimum. As it works its way through the fab, this is called cycle time. Anyway, during the shortage, TSMC and Samsung and these fabs said, hey, you have to buy the chips, you have to prepay for them, which these companies never had to do before. And you have to order them very far in advance, to where the company doesn't have visibility into what their demand will be 8 months down the line. So you have Nvidia recently took a $1.3 billion charge. They said, well, we lost $1.3 billion because they prepaid for all these GPUs that they don't need. So it's like a freight train. It takes a long time to get going. But then when you say, oh, no more, no more, it takes a long time to stop. But they can't say no more because they already bought them. So Nvidia has been saying that they're going to have an oversupply of their current cards that they're making until Q4. But that's Nvidia's fiscal Q4, which means until April. So this means they're just warehouses full of graphics cards that they can't just back out of. They have to have them. And whether or not they are making the AIBs purchase in bulk ahead of time is, we don't know that for sure. But that, you could expect that would be rational. So folks like EVGA are sitting on a ton of inventory, likely, that they can do very little with. They're not going to make money. It's loss. They're going to lose money on these things. So, I mean, that could be an exacerbating factor. Of course, EVGA hasn't said why, but this is definitely complicating matters.
And for people who don't know, just in case you're watching this after the fact, but I'm going to cite this from Gamers Nexus, who had a video on this earlier today. We read it earlier, but if you probably didn't watch that video, Gamers Nexus is reporting EVGA has terminated its relationship with Nvidia. EVGA will no longer be manufacturing video cards of any type, citing a souring relationship with Nvidia as the cause, among other reasons that were minimized. EVGA will not be exploring relationships with AMD or Intel at this time, and the company will be downsizing imminently as it exits the video card market. Customers will still be covered by EVGA policies. We're going to talk about that, but EVGA will no longer make RTX or other video cards. The company already made some 20 EVT samples of 4090, but will not be moving to production and has killed all active projects pertaining to cards, including Kingpin cards. And also, I want to add this other statement. It's from Tae Kim, who writes for Barron's. He says he tweeted earlier, can't reach EVGA as their staff is in a meeting, but here's a classy statement from Nvidia. Quote, we've had a great partnership with EVGA over the years and will continue to support them on our current generation of products. We wish Andrew and our friends at EVGA all the best. So, yeah, not good.
Yeah, that's going to be rough. And this is, I mean, it's going to be bad, like, for the companies. I mean, if you're looking to pick up a graphics card in the near future, like, I suspect there's going to be a deluge hitting the markets of both current gen and next gen stuff will be coming out, and they've got to sell it somehow. What's the official word from the earnings statement, Paul, from Nvidia? They said they expect their sell-through to be less than supply until April of 2023.
Yes, and that was on it wasn't an earnings call. This was the follow-up call that actually Colette Kress, the CFO, did just 2 days ago. I was actually going to write a story about it, but here you go. They had confirmed that essentially that this will last until Q4, but Q4 for them is at the end of April, is how long they expect to have an oversupply. So, that raises a lot of questions about how they're going to handle the launch of the new GPUs during the shortages. Nvidia sells those chips at a fixed cost. The folks that are making the money from the markups are the middlemen, the retailers and such. But I totally lost my train of thought. But so essentially, the middlemen are the ones who are going to lose all of that extra profit. So smaller outfits will absolutely be hurt by that more.
And then also earlier you were talking about how AIBs work. A lot of people may not be familiar with that. Like a lot of people assume they just simply buy the die itself and that's it, but it's the whole taco, right?
Correct. Well, it depends upon the agreements that Nvidia has with each individual board maker and the type of GPU that they're buying. But Nvidia doesn't just provide them with the GPU die. They also often provide them, more often than not, with VRAM, because that market, is very volatile. And if you could purchase in massive bulk like Nvidia, and you're buying a ton of graphics memory, that's actually helping your partners, because EVGA can't walk into Samsung and slap down a few $billion, like, or however many hundreds of millions, like
Micron, right?
yeah,
Micron
yeah,
makes
Micron.
GDDR6X.
Sorry, yes, whomever they're buying their memory from, they can't just go in and slap down all that money and get the big volume discounts that Nvidia can. So this is actually a good thing under most circumstances for the AIBs. Also, when you run into problems sourcing some items, like during the shortages, like PMICs, which are power management chips of all varieties, these were a real big pain point during the shortage. So under circumstances, Nvidia will help source these types of components and sell this. So essentially, they're giving an AIB a kit of components. So while Nvidia may not be actually raising the price of the GPU, some of those other secondary components that they're sending them may also be more expensive. Now, if people are buying this in bulk way ahead of time, and then all of a sudden the market crashes, and they've got the kit before they've even put it together, costs more than what they can sell the card for. Well, obviously, this would create some sort of a problem here.
Yeah.
There he is.
Video cards right there. Thanks, video cards, for joining us. Yeah, like EVGA is exiting like 4 days before the big ADA RTX 4090 expected reveal. Like, how bad do things have to be? That gives you some good insight. And wow,
Yeah.
not something I was expecting to hear when we were getting ready for the show today.
And then also going very public about this, because
Yeah.
unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to watch some of the other videos, but they went on the record with, some like Steve at Gamers Nexus and other people. If it's big enough, it's not even just like, this isn't just like, hey, yeah, we're folding up our GPU division. It's also basically flipping Nvidia the bird on the way out. I mean, so whatever it was very hot, it sounds like.
This is a very public burning of the bridge. I mean, you really don't expect.
Yeah, doused it with gasoline, lit it on fire, dropped it through a few bombs on it. Yeah,
Yeah,
the bridge is gone.
It's gone. So it doesn't seem like, yeah, you're not going to like, hey, in 6 months, everything's cleared up, we're coming back. I don't think that happens with this, right? So.
And Gordon was earlier talking about, Gordon or Paul was talking about their awesome BFG 8800 GTX.
Yeah, we were talking about sort of other companies that have like something blew them out of the water, and BFG was one of those. There have been many vendors that something went wrong along the way and broke them, but even those, it doesn't feel like it's comparable to this, because now within literally the last few weeks, we've had a lot of rumors, speculation that Intel's basically thinking about like, well, ARC is going nowhere. This is too hard. We're going to quit here. And then you've seen EVGA quit now. It's just all those signs are just like, this is a perfect storm of disaster for, everybody was celebrating it because they didn't like Intel a couple weeks ago, if you don't like Intel, but this is going everywhere, right? And this is likely going to affect AMD too, don't you think? How could AMD's graphics business not also be impacted by this?
Well, they definitely weren't as popular for mining. And how much supply that they've had, I don't feel like maybe they were moving nearly as many cards as Nvidia, and Nvidia was probably, I would safely say that they were preferred for mining. What do you think, Jared? You've been following mining very closely.
I mean, like, we've seen all the shots and videos of stuff of miners walking through their warehouse full of cards, all running Ethereum pretty much. And, when I think back on those, I saw plenty of Founders Editions. I saw a lot of Gigabyte, a lot of MSI. For AMD, I saw Sapphire fairly frequently as well. I don't seem to recall many, if any, where you saw just rack upon rack of EVGA mining GPUs. So, I mean, there is that. Like, maybe NVIDIA was just like, hey, we can't give you the cards. We don't have them. We don't have the chips. And it was other companies that were selling them on. But that's just the perception I have. Who knows what was going on behind closed doors. Maybe there's secret warehouses full of EVGA cards owned by EVGA's employees mining like crazy. I mean, I don't know.
Well, yeah. And I guess I was just thinking, even if AMD's graphics, like they weren't super popular with miners, but I'm just thinking, like, if you're AMD now and you were looking at RDNA 3 launch, and you're looking like there's going to just be this tidal wave of 3060s, 3060 Ti's, 3070s, 3070. I mean, just like they're just going to continue to wash on the shore. Like the prices will get lower. The miners will want them for very high prices, and then they're going to keep lowering them till because they don't want them anymore. So that's even going to affect AMD, even if they haven't been the friendliest to miners, right? Would you agree?
I think it should impact both AMD and Nvidia on their plans for next generation graphics cards. I would imagine it's particularly with Nvidia. I mean, sorry to sidestep AMD, but for sure with Nvidia, it's probably not in their best interest to release a card that's priced very well right now. Because the thing is this, Nvidia keeps saying, hey, we didn't raise our prices for the GPUs during this period of time. That's correct. They were selling those GPU to the AIBs at the same price. But what they did is they made a whole lot more high-end. The bulk of the market is the lower-end GPUs. But during a shortage and with a crypto craze, you're going to make as many high-end chips as you possibly can. The mix changes. That's how they make more money. It's because they're selling only the highest-end parts. So when you look at a vendor like EVGA, not only are they sitting on a ton of stock, but they're sitting on the worst type of stock to have, 3090s and stuff like that actually, when prices are normal, sell a very small percentage. What's the hero percentage of a product stack is very low.
Yeah.
So they're sitting on the worst type of inventory to have. And then here comes Nvidia. What are they launching? The highest end GPU. So what would Nvidia do? They probably price their 4090s through the ceiling in order to discourage folks because they need to get rid of this inventory. This is a big weight around their leg. They can either delay the launch or they can jack up prices or a combination of the two. I bet.
But doesn't it also, I bet
a combination.
They're just going to build up stock of 4090 cards if they're not selling them, right? I don't know. We'll see. And talking about EVGA and Nvidia,
you can sell a 4090 for a lot longer than you can sell a 3090.
So one of the things I was talking about with Gordon and Paul earlier is like the 3090 Ti launched at $1999 at the end of March. And that was the official MSRP. I thought it was a ludicrously expensive card then. And, price came down pretty quickly. Right now, the Founders Edition is in stock at Best Buy, and it's priced at $10.99. So NVIDIA's own model sold through Best Buy, they've hacked off 45% of the price, something like that. And EVGA has to compete against that too. So EVGA's 3090 Ti, legitimately, how much more than a Founders Edition would you pay to get the special EVGA FTW3 Ultra or whatever model you're talking about? I don't think most people in the current market especially are going to pay more than maybe $200 extra, probably not even that. So, the margins come down for everybody when Nvidia has to drop their Founders Edition prices that far. It's not good.
And they have to do that just to move it, right? Because otherwise, it's not going to sell. It's just simply not going to sell.
They just took $1.3 billion charge. What's funny is this. I asked Jensen Huang this question, the NVIDIA CEO. I tweeted out the thing. It was a non-answer, but I did ask him about this possibility back in March. I asked him, back in May, excuse me. I'll just read it real fast. Back in May, I asked NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang about the potential oversupply for GPUs due to the company's prepayments. Today, they cited that as the reason they took a $1.32 billion charge. So I had asked him, I said, you prepaid for production capacity during the shortages to ensure supply. However, in the past, when we've had a crypto mining collapse, as we're seeing right now, we've seen significant oversupplies have killed ASPs, which is how much they can sell it for, and flooded the market with used cars. Since NVIDIA has paid in advance for this production, are there any steps you've taken to avoid this problem? And he gave me a non-answer. He really repeated my question back, affirming that, it's kind of an issue.
I love when Jensen gets a tough question and he comes back at you with restatements
it's not as big of an issue as you think, is what he said. I can assure you it's not as big as you think. I can assure you it's not as big as you think. Well, here's the thing. Looking back today, when I asked the question in May, I didn't think it was 1.3 billion. So he's wrong. I didn't think it was that big. This is
Bigger than you
obviously-
think, apparently, or
You would
bigger
think
than
they
you
were supposed
thought.
to be this, but now they have to get rid of those cards. They have to do something with them. And if you have that type of a oversupply, then they are directly competing with AIBs, and I'm sure some folks are getting salty about that. I mean, I would.
Right. Yeah, and when you have to, because you basically you're running your business. The only way to get these things is to do this long-term contract. The bottom falls out, and you're left. So then you try to renegotiate, but again, business, Nvidia is a business. They have to pay their shareholders, and then they are also looking at eating all these. So it feels like that's where the tension's going to come. It's like, look, we're not going to survive this. And I imagine the company's like, look, we got no choice either because we're not going to, this is going to materially hurt our business either way. So
Slim Jim says, "Is this the beginning of the great GPU crash of 2022?" Yeah, and based on what Nvidia themselves is saying, that's going to extend into April of 2023 is the projection, and they could be wrong. It could last longer.
right. I just don't see how the market can absorb, say minimum more than 10 million GPUs coming out of the mining service, right?
And you've got inflation on top of that. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to factor in. People are feeling the pinch on gas prices, food prices, all these other things. And it's like, yeah, everyone who upgraded their GPU in the past 2 years when they got those government stimulus checks, they're not going to be upgrading again anytime soon.
Yeah. Do you think it could possibly harm the business of AMD or Nvidia at this point? How much could it hurt them? Could it I
don't think they go out of business completely, right? But
right.
It's certainly doing harm already.
Yes.
Will it do more harm than the good that they got from the last 2 years of unprecedented demand for their products? That's tougher to say. I mean, they sold every Ampere GPU they manufactured and then some for almost 2 years straight. So
yeah, I mean, they're going to have to take steps, and some of those could be severe. I mean, if you have a sudden lessening of demand all throughout your supply chain, you have individuals that you pay to handle these tasks, and some of those people are going to find themselves without jobs. And it's something that just reverberates throughout their entire business, and how they handle it, will of course vary by company, but it will absolutely have an impact.
Do you think? Go ahead. Go, Jared.
Ruru2 says, "I hope people are not overpaying for used mining GPUs." And we were talking about this earlier too. I don't think that was live, but basically when you think about it, these miners, they bought cards. In some cases, they were paying $1,200 or at least over $1,000 for a 3060 Ti or a 3070 last year. So in their mind, they're like, yeah, I still want to sell the card for what I paid for it, or at least some percentage of that. And, maybe they're hoping for 80 cents on the dollar. Well, guess what? If you ask for $800 for a 3060 Ti or a 3070, nobody's going to buy it. Nobody should buy it. You should look at the price of a new card and you should say, hey, it's been used for a year and a half. I want to pay 60% of that new card price. So to me, I'm like, if you've got a 3070 that you want to sell right now, you're probably looking at no more than $300 as a reasonable price. Same for 3060 Ti, 3080, maybe $500. But, there's miners that they think they're going to get $1,000 or whatever because they haven't followed the market. But I've got an article that I just did today and yesterday looking at eBay prices right before Ethereum's merge happened, and it was still profitable, like 50 cents a day to mine yesterday. Now everything's saying like you're losing 10 cents, or you're losing 20 cents, or you're losing 30 cents per day running a GPU mining the best option that's out there. So your power costs, and that's at like 10 cents per kilowatt hour power cost, you're still losing 30 cents per day. If you're in California, like Gordon, like what do you pay for power, Gordon? 20 cents, 30 cents?
I think it's like $12. I'm not sure because it's California.
So yeah, people in other markets, they can't afford to run these mining GPUs at all for mining purposes.
So here is just when we're talking, while we're talking about this, this is breaking news, but John Petty Research, better known as JPR, is one of the most recognized GPU analyst firms in the industry. They just put up an article that I'm skimming while we talk. This is interesting. I would assume that John Petty has some very good contacts at EVGA. He says here on September 7th, Nvidia offered via Best Buy a 3090 Ti for $1,099, undercutting EVGA and other partners that were offering their products at $1,399. There was no warning of this price cut, and it left the partners with little choice but to sell their inventory at below cost to meet the Nvidia price. MSI dropped their price to $1,799 on Newegg, and EVGA dropped theirs to $1,149. And then he goes on to talk about some of the things that we already know, but this is indicative of probably what has really kicked this into overdrive. And, you know, at the same time, as he's pointing out throughout this article, the margins for the AIBs have shrunk a lot. As Nvidia has started to soak up more of the margin, they're not leaving the AIBs much room, and they're making their own, you know, their own stuff. So this is a big problem. So I'm trying to read his conclusion. I'll fill you in as I read.
And I'm just thinking I'll burn up some time here while you read, Paul, but I think, like, you know, EVGA is a long valued partner of Nvidia. You heard that earlier, but in business it gets brutal. I'm sure they're like, you know what? We are going to move these 3090s below cost. I don't care about your business because I also have to care about my business too, right? Because it's, you know, every person for themselves when it gets ugly like this, it feels like.
Yeah, and then we're dealing with a sunk cost for a lot of these companies now too. They already paid for, in the case of Nvidia, they paid for the chips from Samsung and the future chips from TSMC. You know, EVGA probably bought the cards from Nvidia months ago. They've already spent that. Now the question isn't, you know, hey, can we sell these cards? It's how much can we get for these cards because we've already bought them and now we need to just get whatever we can out of them.
Right.
So yeah.
The key thing is, you know, when Nvidia is taking a $1.3 billion write down, that's because they're going to sell the cards at cheaper than what they paid for them to be made. That's how they're making up the difference. It's like, we lost 1.3 billion. So then they cut the prices and that's how they're getting it back. How do the guys who Nvidia is selling the chip at a profit to, and now Nvidia is selling for less than they got it for, they stand no chance of competing. So I could see how this would inflame tensions. And it sounds like there were some, you know, already exacerbating issues here with this, the shrinking profit that they can make off of the cards. So,
where does Nvidia go though? Because I mean, it feels like they have to basically, you know what, we're going to hurt some of our partners, but we have to, for our own bottom line. At the end of this, do they just hope somebody else steps up and fills that vacuum, or do they rely on the other ones that are more diversified, like, you know, Gigabyte, MSI, or Asus, to step up and take the spot that EVGA? I mean,
only Nvidia and EVGA maybe really know how many cards were going through EVGA in a year. They don't disclose that, but I have to think like those worldwide partners like Asus and MSI and Gigabyte, like they had to be moving a lot more cards than EVGA. Can you buy EVGA cards in Europe and Asia? I don't know. I don't think so.
I seem to recall something about that you can, but Western Europe, yes. EVGA dropping Nvidia will put a big hole in Nvidia's North American sales of AIBs, where in EVGA enjoyed 40% market share. He says 40% market share of American sales of AIBs was EVGA. And EVGA fans in Western Europe. Nvidia can overcome that by adjusting allocation levels for the remaining AIB partners, as well as direct sales through Best Buy, but it will take a quarter or two. When you think about that, stop and think about that. JPR, the industry analyst firm, says 40% of AIB GPUs in the United States are EVGA. That's significant.
Yeah, that's a big hole to fill, and then at the same time, if you're Asus, MSI, and the other,
you're loving it.
Well, you're loving it,
well,
but you
right
also
now.
Well, but
You're not loving it if you have to deal with the same crap.
if you're them, and also, the thing is, they're also holding their old bag of crap that because obviously whatever's splashing back onto EVGA is also splashing back onto every single card maker. Are they really going to yeah, we want to crank up our numbers? Like, we really want to sign this contract for more parts. And no one knows what the future is going to look like over the next 12 to 24 months, period, anywhere in the world. I could see them we're going to play it very conservative. So it feels like it might constrict Nvidia in somewhat, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect that if the other AIBs weren't already playing it conservative and limiting the amount that they're ordering, they are definitely doing so now. I mean, I think this would be almost like it's a canary in a coal mine or something. I mean, some type of.
This is one of our co-editors here, our managers. ASUS, MSI, and Gigabyte were getting lots of help from Nvidia to sell bundled motherboards and PSUs for the last few years. So, presumably these big partners of Nvidia, they should have a fair amount of surplus from last year and the year before, maybe. I mean, it's tough to say though. Like, they sold everything they produced, but
yeah,
did they sell everything they wanted to?
I don't know. I think the bottom fell out too fast, don't you think?
Newegg is now bundling monitors with GPUs.
Yeah.
It's the exact reverse, and now they're giving you a monitor. It's
get a free monitor if you buy this GPU.
Yeah, as Paul was saying before, it was like Newegg was like, you want this GPU, you better buy this lousy power supply.
That's going to explode.
Now it's like, buy this monitor, you get this crap GPU.
Yeah. It's just insane to see it go from this to this. And to me, the danger, though, is this volatility we've never seen anything like this, ever. In my entire lifetime, we've never seen volatility like this. My question to you is, AMD, Nvidia, they said, you know what, we've had enough of this. We've had enough of this crypto fun. I mean, remember, we brought this up earlier, RX 580s, they couldn't sell for $130, right? So they look, we're tired of you screwing everything up for everybody. You screw up our market for the people, our actual long-term customers, and then you screw it up. You leave us holding the bag when it gets too tough for you to do your thing. Is there anything they can do to prevent mining from screwing it up? Because this is now the third
roll back
rodeo.
The clock. Roll back the clock to 2000 or so when we had non-programmable shaders. I mean, we didn't have programmable shaders.
When we were discussing it, my only thought would be to adopt more infinity cache type approaches, where you get the benefits of the cache, but not the throughput of main memory.
And it's worth noting that
mining loves that memory bandwidth.
So mining is basically this hashing algorithm. It's random memory access for your whole memory space. In the case of Ethereum, they had the directed acyclic graph, the DAG, that grows over time. So I think it's up to about 5 gigabytes now. It's more than 4 gigabytes. So 4 gigabyte cards can no longer run. Well, they couldn't run Ethereum before Ethereum died off. So it meant that your cache didn't help because everything was just a random access, and it's like, hey, I want this piece of data here, now this one. And so the cache was never able to store the stuff. And so your pure memory bandwidth was what mattered. And if you don't have that random access patterns, then what you end up with is cryptocurrencies. They have an ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit, created just for that algorithm, which is what happened with Bitcoin's SHA-256 hashing function. We now have thousands of little tiny ASIC chips that just crunch SHA-256, and that's all they do, and they do it really fast. And so you get a 3,000 watt ASIC that consumes, or that provides 80 terahash per second all on its own. Well, Ethereum and Kapow and Octopus and Ethereum Classics hashing algorithm, they all used memory hard algorithms that basically you couldn't optimize for as easily. And so ASICs were harder to create. And so there were actually Ethereum ASICs that were in the works, but they weren't that much better than just a GPU. And so now how do you get around this in the future? I know what Nvidia can do. They can just make everything pure ray tracing, because ray tracing is not programmable shaders. I really don't know what you can do, other than you provide less raw bandwidth and more cache.
Yep.
That helps, and that's what ADA will do. Like, we expect the top ADA, the AD102 chip, will have 96 megabytes of L2 cache. And we expect the same from AMD's RDNA 3. They'll have 6 memory compute dies, each with 16 megabytes of L2 cache, L3 cache in that case. But
and when you look at LHR was kind of bolted on to Ampere. I don't believe that they designed it with that in mind. And so, it got cracked, but I do believe that was a genuine attempt. I mean, I agree with Gordon entirely. This is not good for Nvidia, and Nvidia knows it. It's just it destroys the gaming community.
They can't predict it.
Yeah, and it destroys the gaming community. For 2 years, people are buying consoles, and a lot of those folks are deciding that's good enough, and they're leaving, and it's hurting PC gaming, and that is Nvidia's bread and butter. I mean, it is. They need it. So I believe LHR was a genuine attempt. Can they do something? But LHR was a bolt-on. It's like, let's try this. But
and
now,
it only targeted Ethereum.
When they're setting down at the drawing board, and can they do something in hardware that you can't get around? There's some pretty smart folks in the semiconductor industry.
Like, it'd be interesting to know, like, are there enough commonalities in the hashing functions used by cryptocurrencies other than Ethereum, right? Other than Dagger, Hashimoto, like, could they find ways to build it in early on to say, hey, like, we're going to run poorly on these things? I don't know. Like that's one of the, like, what does hashing actually do in terms of the hardware instruction mix? And I'm not entirely sure. Like, is it lots of multiplication, or is it like bits shifting around, flopping bits from zeros to one and back, XORs? Like, maybe they can specifically de-optimize things that aren't used in graphics but were used in hashing functions. Smarter people than me will probably be figuring that out, because we had something like this kind of happen in 2011, then it happened in 2014, then it happened in 2017, and now it's really happened worse than any of those.
And it will happen again
2020.
In my belief, I believe it will happen again.
Yeah, but so to me, that just says, like, the scar from this long term is
it wasn't painful enough.
Like, this is going to be worse than any of the previous ones, especially for Nvidia. Like, I mean, the RX 580, that was bad for AMD, but I would think they're just like you're saying, like, you know what, we're just going to make cards with very, very little memory on them that will increase the cache, and you just make them the most unattractive cards to potential future mining. But then you kind of think, well, that's going to affect the performance curve for gamers somewhat too, right? I mean, that's kind of the sucky thing, is it'll be bad for gaming, but they have to put these kind of poison pills in the architecture itself, because they know this is always bad for them. They always get left holding the bag, and here it is again, left holding the bag to the tune of $1.3 billion, and having to essentially put one of their most loyal companies overboard because they couldn't eat that deal either, probably, right?
And I'll admit, I'm shocked at EVGA. I figured they would be more boutique than the 40% of the North American market.
That's huge.
It's not, it's not just throwing some little, I mean, I would say Power Color, but I understand the Power Color is very big in China, but some little
toll
company off the side. Yeah, I don't know. It's what all the factors are that contributed to that: shrinking margins, undercutting them, and not communicating that.
The other thing is, it's also EVGA primarily sold in the U.S. and Western Europe, right?
Correct.
Those are two very, generally rich, wealthy.
Those are the enthusiasts of
society.
The enthusiast communities.
Yes.
So you can imagine, if it's so bad that it's going to put EVGA out of business in GPUs here, what is happening to the rest of the world, where the markets are less resistant to it? What's going to happen? Are we going to just see this roll down the hill? And then also, what happens to if you're an SI and you're like, we can't get our business, we can't even stay in business because we can't get graphics cards. Yes, I will sign this contract for 50,000 cards for the next 3 years, right?
Yeah.
what do?
And
You're done, right? You got to you want to go to court over that, or you go out of business. It seems like we have not seen the end of this yet. It feels like.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that we're going to see repercussions. I don't know if they'll all be as severe as EVGA and how much this, the oversupply played into it, but it absolutely did play a role.
Yeah.
You know, so
I know. I just kind of think like, yeah, because we don't know, because there could have been a lot of extenuating circumstances that may not, but it just kind of feels like, to me, like the shock is EVJ's been doing this for 20 years, I think.
yes, very long time.
Almost 20 years. They've been, one of the most recognized names, and they've just like, no more. No, we can't
And they've
take
seen
it.
a lot in those 20 years, I can assure you. So whatever they're facing now is absolutely a hill to climb. And
That's why it's so scary to me, I
and
guess.
they're, will EVGA survive this is another question. They do have motherboards, but maybe I'll be surprised at how many EVGA motherboards are being sold, but they tend to be highly specialized, and lately, at least my experience, they come to market later than the launch.
Right.
For instance, at an event maybe recently, I didn't see any there for the launch of maybe a new chip, maybe or maybe not. But
I mean,
EVGA
EVGA graphics cards weren't even they weren't necessarily the cheap Nvidia cards either. They had some lower cost ones.
They have some diversification.
Yeah, but not enough to absorb the loss of the GPU market.
And EVGA is promising to do right by its customers, which we would expect them to do, and probably hold them to that, to honor their warranties. But if something happens to the broader company, what happens when companies fold?
Right. The warranty goes with them.
The warranty goes with them. Yes, I cannot. We were talking about my 8800 GT. Gordon mentioned BFG, and I mean, come on, I love BFG and my ancient card, but I can't RMA it, even if the warranty was still good, which it's not. But,
yeah, I mean that's the
3DFX cards. Anyone got a good warranty on those when Nvidia bought 3DFX's assets?
Yeah, so
that's why
keyboards, gaming mice, capture devices, cases, cooling, motherboards, gaming.
They do
power supplies.
So those are all bloodbath areas too, because I've heard from people like there are thin margins, and people have basically, truckloads of keyboards, mice, because everybody wanted to get on the RGB peripheral gaming thing, and that has blown up too. So now
demand is evaporated from all corners.
Yeah.
The desktop PC market is just taking an absolute beating right now. The CPU market was the lowest, and I don't recall, it was many double digits of years when I reported on that last. PC shipments fell 23% in the second quarter alone, according to Analyst, if I'm saying that correctly. But
yeah,
I mean, CPU market desktop CPU sales were the lowest in 30 years last quarter. That was August 12th that I wrote that article. That tells you the severity of this. That's a 30-year event. And with those desktop CPUs goes everything else.
I mean, 1992, that's when I graduated from high school. That's a long time ago. And
yes. So this is like a tectonic. This is the tectonic.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it feels like it might be like it could blow up. Like I remember back then, it was Steve Jobs' friend who built the actual Apple. I can't remember his name.
Wozniak.
Wozniak at the time, because remember, I mean, I'm going even a little further back. So you had the personal computer market implode, and Wozniak. I remember his statement to whatever USA Today was like. You know what? People are just going to stop buying computers. Go build a hi-fi system again or something like that, because it's kind of like over. And I wonder if that's going to get. I don't think it'll get that bad. Right? I mean, I can't imagine it because it's a far different market, but it just feels like
we always hear this. The PC is dead. Tablets are taking over. We've weathered this for a long time. I mean, I think it's a great time to buy a PC. I mean, maybe
not right now, but wait a month.
Wait a month.
Think that statement through a little bit. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's not. I do want to. We should point that out because every time you have one of these, events, these seismic events, people come out, they sharpen up their keyboard, and you see the PC is dead story, right?
Correct.
We're going to see
That's
those.
it.
I've never
floated
read
again.
one of those before. No.
I mean,
What are you talking about?
come on, man. Somebody's probably writing it right now.
I bet they are.
I'm sure they are, and I just think it's ridiculous because yeah, it's going to be ugly, but it always survives, and AMD and Nvidia will continue to the other side of this event. It'll be ugly, but it feels like no matter
They
what,
will.
PC gaming will survive.
And I think
So
AMD has a lot more flexibility than Nvidia in this regard, and I believe that because they have some real purchasing power, because they're buying tons of CPUs and high dollar, and they can shift their wafer allocations. Right now, when they're saying, "Hey, we're buying all of these wafers from you far off in the future," if demand craters for GPUs, and they're still owe TSMC $500 million, or let's say 1.3 billion. It's conceivable that instead of having to still make those GPUs, they could say, we'll put that area into something else, right? We'll build something else. They're more diversified.
I have a question though. So clearly, the turbulence right now is on Nvidia. A partner that has sold 40% of its graphics cards to consumers is done. If you're AMD or even Intel, do you take this advantage? Like, do you see this as an advantage? How do they shape this to take advantage of Nvidia? Because Nvidia's always had that huge 70 plus market share over AMD, no matter what AMD has done. Can AMD use it to their advantage, or do they just go, you know what, we can't read the tea leaves right now. Let's just wait it out, or do they try to take advantage of it? And then even does this also change the math for Intel a little bit? I don't know if it does because there's a lot of
it
bad
feels
words
to me
over there.
like everything that happens to Nvidia and caused this thing with EVGA to happen, like that's not restricted to Nvidia by any means. And so it's like their partners are likely dealing with the same stuff. I don't know if they had as much oversupply. Maybe they don't, so maybe it won't be as bad. Intel, they're making ARC chips on TSMC's N6 process, and it's like, I don't know how many of those they ordered, and I don't know how they're doing. We keep seeing the Intel graphics things about, A770 is getting close, A750 is getting close. I really hope to have one of those cards soon. But all indications are those are maybe RTX 3070 competitors. And we're talking about how the market's about ready to fall out. And RTX 3070 might only be able to sell for $300, say, right? Like just spitballing a number. It's like, well, do you buy a tried and true RTX 3070 for $300, $350? Or do you pay the same thing for an ARC A770? I mean, I don't see anyone being excited to pay more for Intel than they would pay for equivalent performance from Nvidia. So this is bad for everyone. And the same for AMD. Like, if the 3070 costs $400 or whatever it ends up at, and
It drives
that's a
down
competitor, it drives down the 6700 price. I mean, the 6700 is already selling well below its original MSRP. Partly because its MSRP was higher, maybe, but even so, it's not good for them. And then, we talked about used cars, and used cards. Slim Jim says, how can we trust used GPUs that's been stretched to its limit 24 hours a day for months or years? Electromigration, all these stuff. Honestly, I'm not that concerned about most mining GPUs that were used in a big mining factory because they probably would have had a cleaner environment. They would have tried to optimize performance as best as they could. Buy it from a reputable reseller if you can, meaning like go through eBay with a place that offers returns, test the heck out of it, and if it doesn't stack up, like return that thing ASAP. Don't pay in cryptocurrency for your used GPU. Don't give someone cash that you meet in a parking lot because you might end up with a brick. But if you can test the card and return it if it doesn't work, I'm not super concerned about the used market that much. But that's going to drive down prices again. So yeah, it's all bad for all the graphics cards.
But when you look at exposure, it's really about who's going to take the most pain. It's whoever has the most GPUs sitting around. whoever has the most GPUs sitting around is going to be whoever holds more of the market share. Nvidia, according to JPR, that are one of our
80%.
80%. AMD is at 20, is as of the latest quarter. So Nvidia has a much bigger problem than
4
AMD.
times as much problems.
Yes, they are exposed.
I do wonder, like, so assuming Ada is made on TSMC's 4N, that's 4 nanometer NVIDIA process, Hopper H100 is also made on 4N. Can they allocate more things to Hopper? Is there enough demand from supercomputing and data centers and enterprise to suck up some of that?
The United States government just slapped sanctions on Nvidia for H100s and said they can't sell them to China. Now China
That makes it hard to sell them.
A massive, massive customer because I mean they've got 1.6 billion people on the internet over there, and most of their internet and data centers that are using those GPUs for AI are based in China. China, the great firewall of China, as we all know. Nvidia is very exposed to the Chinese market in general. From a financial perspective, this is something you read a lot about. Maybe if you read certain things, and so it's already a problem. But now the H100 is a no-fly zone, so that's problematic. This is another problem. Nvidia's got a lot of problems, and
they all
supply shortage ain't one.
and they all came down at the same time, right?
Correct.
That seems kind of insane because that H100
Nvidia should have been
sanction,
declaring, stop the proof of stake for Ethereum, keep on proof of working. I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, truthfully, I've followed Ethereum enough since 2015. I've known about it, and I've followed it enough to have heard about its shift to proof of stake happening for at least 3 years. So the fact that it's actually happened now is kind of mind-blowing to me. I'm like, wow, they actually really finally did it. You know, it got pushed off. It was going to happen last year. It was going to happen at the start of this year. It was going to happen in April, then June, then August. And it actually happened in September 15th. And it's like, wow, you know, they finally moved forward with it. And I don't even know if it's going to be good for Ethereum.
You think they would have seen this coming? Even a hack like me is asking about it back in May.
Yeah.
I'm saying, what are you doing to prepare?
And the weird thing about proof of stake, though, is like now the value in the cryptocurrency is not in using it. It's in staking it and holding it and getting your 3.5% per year. So I'm like, does that even help Ethereum in the long run? I don't know. Like, I'm not a big cryptocurrency proponent anyway, so I don't really care. But it just seems weird to me that your biggest value, it's like gold. Your biggest value in gold is to store it up and hoard it. And it's like, well, how does that work for something like a cryptocurrency where there should be value in people using that cryptocurrency? So
crypto will be back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure we're going to see lots of forks of Ethereum that go back to proof of work, but whether any of them will be useful.
Whether it'll be back on GPUs, that's of course. And it's also debatable whether or not it'll be back. I believe it'll be back. Whether or not it'll come back to GPUs, I think is probably less likely. But I think crypto, will come back. We've said this how many times now?
That it would die. This is the last time.
This is it. That's it.
I don't know. I kind of hope this time because this has been the disruption over the years. Is just I'm so sick of it. Well, let me ask you an AMD question though. So if you're Team Red, you see Nvidia's big exposure is at the high end. We've talked about this because they want to launch 4090. They're probably going to have to price that very high to not screw with the 3090s that are saturating the market. And they can't really cut 3090 anymore because it's just too many of them and all their partners are basically saying they're going to go out of business. Isn't it to AMD's advantage to launch something that is more powerful than a 3090, but then price it so it forces that you have to take advantage of Nvidia right now, right?
Yeah. Like if the RX 7900 XT is, I mean, like we've seen the rumors floating around. I should pull up a slide on that. I'll get to it in a minute. But like RX 7900 XT is supposedly pushing like 12,000 something shader units. It's going up from a maximum of 80 compute units on the 7900 XT, 7950 XT, up to 96 compute units, but each compute unit has double the GPU shaders as before. That's what the rumors say. So we're looking at like 125% more GPU cores in a 7900 XT potentially. Like that's a huge jump in performance. And so if they do everything right, even if they don't get the full 125%, like even if they're only 75% faster than a 7900 XT, right? That's a huge boost. And if they can produce those cheaper because they've got a smaller, chiplet design,
That's
and they
exactly what I'm thinking.
like this could be really interesting in the next couple of months. Like if AMD really wants to gain market share and stick it to Nvidia, sell the 7900 for $700. Do the 3080 thing, because they could actually probably still make a profit at that, and they could sell a lot of them if they're 20, 30, 40% faster than a 3090.
So when you look at AMD, when they came in and they really disrupted Intel, a lot of that was because of price. It wasn't always because they were necessarily faster. So whether or not RDNA 3 is technically faster, I don't think that's as important as the ability to sell it at a lower cost. When AMD went to chiplets, they could undercut Intel because chiplets, just an inherent design advantage that you just can't beat it. It's cheaper to do it that way than it is to make one big chip. I could go on and on about the number of reasons. Trust me, it's cheaper to do chiplets by far. So AMD will have a lot more price flexibility. They can sell it cheaper than Nvidia, just as a ground floor rule. So whether or not they're faster at any given area or the fastest, doesn't matter if they can undercut it, because price, what are you paying price for performance? Possibly there's a way that they could exploit that to their advantage. I mean, I would say that it gives them more room to absorb pricing pain. That's for sure. Whether or not they can absorb it enough to cause Nvidia more pain, perhaps.
To me, that would be that's what they'd want to do, is because this is when your competitor is down, you try to kick them in the ribs as hard
When
as
you
you
have
can.
20% of the market share and your big competitor is hurting, I mean, your job you're trying to gain, sure, kick them when they're down.
There is the fact that nearly all of AMD's add-in board partners also already make NVIDIA cards, except for XFX and Sapphire, right? I'm sure there's overseas companies, but Asus, MSI, Gigabyte, they all make both brands. So I don't know. Can they? I guess if you go with ASRoCs and XFXs and Sapphires, maybe they can gain that market share that way and not worry about offending Asus and MSI and Gigabyte. But those three aren't going to want to kill their Nvidia sales.
That's true, right? Because I mean, that's a problem of being multi-vendor, is like you're looking at a warehouse of parts you got to sell at a loss. You want to sell them and get them out of there as fast as you can. You've got you've got a whole boatload of expiring turkeys you're trying to sell on January 1st or something like that.
I guess one of the big questions here that will help us get our hands around the impact on AIB is, maybe I shouldn't say it because I'm going to have an opportunity to ask the man himself very soon. But I mean, is Nvidia making its AIBs pre-purchase? That's the big question. Because can they stop? Nvidia obviously could not stop to the tune of $1.3 billion to just say, they lost $1.3 billion in the couch cushions, right? I mean, obviously that hurt them very badly. So, I mean, how far out are they forcing these AIBs to purchase, if they are at all? I'll find out the answer to that one. That's intriguing because that'll tell you a lot about their situation.
But I'm sure they have, though, right? I mean, there's no way you don't make people book business. If you're committing to $1.3 billion.
It rolls downhill. I mean, really, typically these things would be passed on to the next.
Does it go further up the hill, though? Does Nvidia go back to TSMC and they go like, look, this ain't working? Or
TSMC may not be inclined to negotiate with Nvidia as much as they would an AMD or an Apple, right? I don't know that. I don't know, but I would say just generally, I don't think they're purchasing nearly as much silicon as some of these other big customers at TSMC's.
Right.
That's going to kind of be, look, it takes 2.5 to 3 months for the chip to go from the beginning of the line to the end. So what they buy, they already have to, chips are amazing, but they definitely have to take what they've ordered. But when TSMC is building these fabs, a modern fab takes somewhere like $15 billion to build from the ground up. And they have to bet that they have to build that with the expectation of that supply or that demand. When they've got to put tools, billions of dollars of tools in place and plan and invest all of their own money. TSMC is investing a whole lot of money, billions, to supply chips to other companies. If those companies walk away, they're left holding the bag. And that's not how business works. So I don't think that there will be much negotiation for TSMC.
I guess though, but at the same time, everybody's asking to change their contracts now, though, right? Because we've heard
exactly.
reports.
And if you start bending on one, you bend on everybody, and then you're left with, if you were TSMC, you're left with billions of dollars of investments that you've made to prepare this floor space, these fabs, these tools, the materials, right? So, if I was TSMC personally, I wouldn't negotiate with anyone.
Yeah, that's kind of you just see that cascade effect is like, you know what, TSMC's telling Nvidia, look, no, sorry, you booked it, we're doing it. Nvidia's like, okay, then they go to their partners and look, you booked it, and it's just kind of that. It just goes all the way down the line.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
All right,
I'm gonna have my 3080 keychain.
I know. Did you remember?
3080 is going to cost as much as a keychain. I'm going to drill a hole in the 3080 I buy for nothing.
It's just amazing to go from like, it was absolutely impossible to get any GPU, even for testing, to do like CPU testing. It's like, hey, can you send a sample over to do these? It's like, nope, tough. No, we're not sending them. Like I would talk to people like, I can't even get one for myself. It's like, that is insane, right?
I just got a 6950 XT, and I do this for a living.
Yeah, no, really, I had to beg people for like, because there was just no way to get them, and now to like, I'm sure they're like
Jared for this, just so we could even do CPU testing. I had to beg Jared for this.
You didn't beg that hard. I was like talking to the partner saying, "Hey, we need one for the CPU guy as well. You got to turn off your blur so we can see this stuff properly."
Yeah. It's just crazy. Just crazy.
Let me see if I.
All right, you can read that. Paul or Jared, what's your reaction? Because invariably, the reaction is out there on Twitter, on Reddit, on the internet. People are going to be saying, you know what? Nvidia, screw you. You deserve it, right? Or in fact, and you see this often said to Intel and, for less so, but even to AMD because they get some flack too. But the people that are out there now celebrating and dancing up and down. Do you think that's the right attitude to take? Because, there's definitely going to be dancing in the streets because, NVIDIA's taking the chin here and, because this blowout is going to be bad. But do you think that is the wrong attitude for the average PC person out there to take?
Jared.
It's going to be like there's going to be potentially short-term celebration, but the question is, where does if this really hurts Nvidia, what does that mean for the next generation GPUs after Ada? What does it mean for the generations beyond that? Does Nvidia weather the storm? If Nvidia disappeared, say this was so bad that Nvidia went bankrupt, right? I don't think that's going to happen, but hypothetically, if Nvidia disappeared, what would happen? AMD would just become Nvidia. They're not going to suddenly be like, oh, we're a big corporation, but we're going to be your friends, unlike Nvidia. They're all corporations. They all want your money. And so, if it hurts Nvidia and Nvidia shrinks a little bit because of it, it's not going to make things necessarily better for us. Will Nvidia have to raise prices to try and compensate? Will they just have a worse product next gen? I don't know. But I'm not one to celebrate anyone getting kicked in the teeth. Like, even if you didn't like the person or the company, it's like it usually it comes back to haunt you if you celebrate too much. Karma is a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, my big concern here would be that both Nvidia and AMD are going to tuck tail under their, they're going to get scared, and they're going to not make commitments on GPU purchases, and we're going to see the inverse. Are they going to get scared and not?
We're going to have artificially high demand or high prices next year.
Yes, correct, because they're scared to purchase too much, because there's big, as we can see, big implications from that.
I mean, and then, Nvidia admitted that with the Ampere launch. Like, they even said to me, they said, COVID was hitting, and we didn't know how that would affect the market. And so when we were looking at ordering Samsung's wafers for Ampere, we said, do we want to order the same as we did with Turing? Do we want to order more? Do we want to order less? And it seems like they kind of said, well, we think we'll go with the same as Turing. Well, then it turned out to be a perfect storm, and demand was huge because all the people working from home, and they didn't have enough. And so even before cryptocurrency, Ampere was in shortages and being scalped for 50% more than the official MSRP. And then cryptocurrency came along and blew that out of the water again. So, like, they can easily do that. Like, just, hey, we're going to reduce our orders, and we'll weather this out, and it will be the gamers wanting to upgrade that will end up being hurt in the long run.
One thing's for sure, if more AIBs drop, the fewer companies there are, the less negotiating power that they have, and the less that they're going to be competing with each other. And you start to get, whenever industries segment around a few companies, it's never a good deal for the consumer. So we want competition. We want as many people making GPUs as possible. And, these kind of things, they're just bad for everybody. So, I mean, I wouldn't celebrate it. I mean, I wouldn't celebrate.
Yeah, I would agree. To me, the way you celebrate is you buy a 3080 for $350.
Right.
That is the best celebration a consumer should take. Is like, damn, I got a 3080 for $350.
So I told you I'd try and pull up some specs here. These are not official. These are rumors or whatever you want to call it, but this is what we're looking at potentially for the next gen GPUs. And so you can see, like, where 4090 lands in comparison to 3090 Ti, where 7900 XT lands in comparison to the 6950 XT. Like, we are looking at huge jumps in gen over gen and performance. There's a lot of question marks in here. Clock speeds are definitely up in the air, which means teraflops are up in the air. But, conservatively, in my book, Nvidia is looking at a 50% improvement in compute, and AMD is looking at more than doubling of compute. So, these next generation GPUs are supposed to be the bee's knees, if you're old enough. What's a Star Trek phrase, Gordon, for something really cool? Tribbles.
I'm just trying to think of what because they always, in Star Trek, it's always made up as like, it's like a Tiberian bat, like, and then they have to give the Earth equivalent because, like, people are like, what does that mean?
Yep.
So
yeah, like, I would love to see 7900 XT. Like, if it's a 308 millimeter chip, there are reasonably credible rumors floating now that 8102 will be 629 millimeters square. So that's twice the size on basically the same cost process node. 4N isn't going to be that different from N5 in my book. And so AMD goes previous gen N6 for their memory controllers and cache. They use the latest and greatest for the compute core. That should be very beneficial in terms of pricing. And so, yeah, they could totally undercut the 3090 Ti. And
it's all about price.
I would love to see a world where AMD and Nvidia are closer to a 50-50 market share again, because back when we had that in the old days, I thought it was more exciting.
When was that?
About 2003.
You look at.
Don't you remember the what was it? The first Radeons, was it the Radeon 9700?
The one that 2001, right?
Yeah,
It
the
was a
9700 Pro was a great card.
oh, fantastic. Did they really achieve 50% back then?
I don't know. I don't
I
know. But I mean, like, Nvidia was
yeah,
only a few years old, so I'm
that's
like,
true.
at some point, Nvidia had to be less than AMD.
God, with that die size, you definitely you squeeze. Yeah, you have to. You take this chance to eat to Nvidia market share because Nvidia cannot do anything. They're basically in a. They can't cut 40 series to compete to put pressure on 7900 XT because they just have to deal with the millions of 3090s and 3080s out there, right?
Yep. And at
Yeah.
the same time, they use one big monster die, and that is there's advantages, performance, disadvantages, which are power, cost. So
Is there any advantage for Intel with Arc? Because I mean, I guess the one thought is A770 comes out. I know that there's going to be a lot of 3070s out there and competing AMD cards.
there's decisions being made right now about the future of that program. I know that Coduria's went and tweeted something out that actually doesn't say what a lot of folks say that he's saying, because there are things, there are rules about when they communicate about roadmaps and things of that nature where they have to be very careful. What he has said they're executing to that roadmap, but when you look at how Intel operates, Intel just killed Optane, but they're trying to sell it, and they're telling folks to buy. They've got these billions of dollars of inventory, and even though they're killing it, they're trying to convince people to buy it, not for one, but for 2 generations, because they have all of these chips laying around. And that's, I'm sorry, that's nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense to me. They have $600 million of inventory, but they're still trying to sell it for the next few generations. So when Intel decides to kill things, if you expect what they do to make sense, I mean, it's just not how it's going to happen. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Pat Gelsinger said in an interview many, many years ago when he was at VMware that the number one mistake that they made with Larrabee was the fact that they went after low latency compute, which is graphics, gaming. He said, if we had stuck to only doing compute, which is high throughput, I could show you the interview. It's amazing if you listen to it. He said, we would have killed NVIDIA. NVIDIA wouldn't be what they are today. He said, we should have stuck where we have our advantages. Now, that's the man at the helm right now saying, if we had stayed out of gaming GPUs with Larrabee, we would have won. And that was a mistake, because NVIDIA wouldn't exist as it is today. So and he is saying that they will exit more businesses. I think that
I think they need to keep GPUs.
I think it's not, I don't know what they're going to do, but whatever they're going to do, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I think Intel has to have something like they need to feed
interview.
Pontevecchio, right?
It's almost like he's talking about today, but it was a decade ago. What?
They need to have something to feed Pontevecchio, right? They need their supercomputer high density compute chip, which is what Larrabee could have been, but then they also tried to do graphics, right?
They're interested in the data center.
So the question is, can they create we've got
GPUs.
Can they keep creating iterations of Pontevecchio, their data center GPU stuff, without having a consumer GPU line as well? Because Nvidia has taken the opposite approach, right? They started with gaming, and they managed to come up with
often just the business dynamics of semiconductor production is that you go into client to sell a whole lot of silicon, whole lot of chips, right? And you may not make very good profits, but you have to do that in order to afford the equipment and amortize that cost over a period of time. You sell the very high margin enterprise stuff. That's where you really make your money. But you need all of this other stuff in order to afford the fab.
Sure.
Intel doesn't have that problem. They're not making the GPUs. So they can just go buy whatever they need. They don't have to make business decisions based upon the traditional fab model where you are making it. No, instead they just go buy it off the shelf from TSMC. I mean, it's not that easy, but that's a watered down version. There are a lot of factors.
But you really think they can sort of break that model and just simply because they're going to stay in data center because it'd be stupid to exit that. But there's potential for them to exit consumer because it's just
Correct.
it ain't
And
no fun.
They don't need the volume per se. They're not making. They're not constrained by the normal decision making process when you're actually making the chips, and you've got to build a $15 billion fab. Well, guess what? TSMC already has a $15 billion fab and like 300 other companies that are spreading the cost of this. So you don't necessarily need it anymore. Typically, that's how the business works, or at least in some form of that. If you're an IDM.
Have we seen that? Have we seen that model work for anybody else though in graphics? I mean, both AMD and Nvidia leverage, consumer parts across everything.
Well, we haven't seen a new graphics entrant and a successful one forever. And there's a lot of AI startups and stuff that are trying to follow a very similar model, but their problem is they're running up against CUDA. I mean, that's kind of an involved conversation. CUDA is the advantage. That's the moat. But yeah,
it's also the thing that the governments want to get away from.
Yeah,
do they really?
Trying.
They want to get away from CUDA?
They're tired of NVIDIA proprietary is my take. Like, look at ROCm and look at One API. That is the Department of Energy saying, we're going to help you build APIs that aren't CUDA, that do the same things as CUDA, but they're going to be open.
The thing is, everybody hates NVIDIA because NVIDIA is about proprietary.
Yeah.
But proprietary gets you a lot. It gets you first. It gets you fast. And everybody, and Apple.
And it gets you compatibility. And you know what? It's like people talk about workstations and they're like, oh, well, this one's so much cheaper. This one's so much cheaper. This or that, or workstation GPUs. Nobody cares about that. The person who buys a GPU driven workstation buys it for the service contract. They buy it because for the next 5 years, no matter what happens, they don't have to worry about a damn thing. That company is going to take care of it. They will pay exorbitant pricing and they really don't care about much else. They just don't want to mess with it because their job isn't playing with computers. Their job is making something. So, that same kind of thinking comes into play here, right? At least in my opinion. I mean, with proprietary software, you don't have to worry about making it work. You're paying somebody to make it work. If it don't work, you tell them and they fix it. That's a hard thing. These people aren't interested in being software devs. They're trying to make like an app on your mobile phone, right?
It's just that proprietary does, as much as everybody else poo-poos on it, it really has achieved some things a lot faster.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Right? I mean, everybody hates it, but you know what? Rule by committee.
Like G-Sync.
Yeah.
What you do
we wouldn't have FreeSync if we didn't have G-Sync, and G-Sync was created proprietary because that was the way to get it done.
Right.
You see the open source stuff grab hold just long enough to put pressure on the proprietary to loosen up a little bit. Hey, loosen up, Jack. And then once they, if you don't do this, we're going over
Paul's
here.
wisdoms.
Yes,
That's
we're
right.
going over here. And so you see open source gain this momentum to the point to where they're like, oh, all right, you want us to do this, right? And then the open source. I hate to say it. That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, I mean, there isn't like Thunderbolt wouldn't be where it is today. In fact, USB 4, except that Intel did it all on their own, right? Because it wouldn't have worked out trying to do the, let's get everybody involved thing again.
Well, they actually initially started that with Apple, what was it, Lightpeak? And then they took it over and they, they certify and they do it through all of their committees. Intel has pushed it. There's no doubt, pushed it down the track. People don't like that they have to pay licensing fees for Thunderbolt to get that designation. But, the idea is, again, when you plug it in, it should work.
Right. And that's what it does. Yeah.
I mean, if the vast majority of people are not interested in making things work, they just want it to work.
They want the sticker. Like G-Sync, frankly, was superior to FreeSync for many, many years, and it has still got a lot of advantage. And the fact that you have to have them certify it and mess with it and tell you what to do with your product, that does make it better sometimes.
Yeah.
Paying for uptime, Ruru 2 is a great insight. That's a great way to boil it down. You pay for the uptime, folks.
Yep. Yes. Another comment over here. Doesn't it make sense for Nvidia to delay the release of the 4000 series enough time to clear the backlog of the 30,000?
It'd make perfect sense if AMD
Which-
wasn't waiting in the wings with RDNA 3.
Yeah.
And you've also
Bad,
got the like they are launching first probably with 4090. They're I don't expect to see 4080 next month. I could be wrong, but I think we'll see 4090 and then 4080 will come the following month. So they're hoping to, continue selling 3090s as long as they can at the highest price possible. And so they come in with the 4090 at, the stratosphere. Maybe it's $19.99. Maybe it's only $14.99. I don't know. But I think Nvidia has shown that they're willing to launch a product like 3090 Ti at $19.99 and then eventually start selling it for $10.99 if they have to. So I don't know. We'll see. If we didn't have AMD, then they could totally delay. But that's the nice thing about competition. So Nvidia's loss is AMD's gain, perhaps.
Gosh, you're standing at the end of the plank. You have to jump anyway because AMD's pushing them
The
off,
sunk
right?
cost.
You have to. Sorry, Jack. You can't back out. Anyway.
I mean, for all we know, pricing was one of those things that pushed EVGA overboard, right? Because it is. I mean, you could see like saying, look, if you're going to launch this thing at $1,400, we're done, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Because we
you want
cannot
us
move these.
to invest in this and launch.
Yeah,
it
because-
into these dynamics when we've
Yep.
already got all of this. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're
Well, and they've also
yes,
might be
come
looking
on,
at it
man.
like
Right.
if
You're not
Nvidia
getting
says
mad.
if Nvidia says it's a $19.99 product like they did with 3090 Ti, that's partly so that they can charge their partners $1,000. Whereas if it's a $1,500 product, then what they charge them $750 or whatever. They charge them half as much, whatever the numbers are. Like Nvidia wants to sell it for as high or say it's worth as much as possible, and EVGA may have just looked at that and said, "You're full of crap, Nvidia. It's not going to sell. We're going to get stuck holding the 4090 bag along with the 3090 Ti bag."
It's about to get really interesting. I mean, when you think about it, they're looking at this oversupply that's going to last a long time. This is absolutely exacerbated by it. May not be the sole source or reason for the problem with EVGA, but it's absolutely exacerbated it and created this tension that led to the breaking point. You would imagine it didn't help, and we're early in this game. Wait till the scalpers start dumping at reasonable prices for what it's worth, which is basically nothing. We're going to have a lot to talk about for a few months, guys. It's only going to get worse, in my opinion. Well, I guess it depends on how you define worse.
It's going to get better.
Which
I'm
side
with
of the
you.
fence you're on.
It's going to be bad for people selling it. It's going to be awesome for the people buying it.
That's right.
That's something I can get behind.
Yep.
Oh, well, I think we've beat that horse pretty well and dead.
Beat it into the ground
Yeah.
for now.
EVGA, the first of perhaps many. I don't know. It's scary to think about from the company perspective, and we're not celebrating EVGA's death at all
absolutely not.
because EVGA closing up shop or at least partially closing up shop, like
It's
that's
bad for everybody.
that's a
bad
lot
for-
of people that just lost jobs, and that's bad for them. And in these times, that's really unfortunate. And this may not be the end of the bad news. Like that's
I've
the
been
scary
buying-
thing.
I've been buying EVGA since their first classified motherboard. I mean, I got a lot of respect for the company. I hate to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our hearts go out to anyone who's affected directly by this, and we hope this isn't actually the end of EVGA. That this is just closing up their GPU shop for now and finding other ways to make money. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
Mama save me.
Yeah, AMD should just buy EVGA. There you go, Paul. That's a good idea.
Well, maybe they'll go AMD. We'll see.
All right, guys. Well, appreciate you being with us, Gordon, and y'all have a
Again.
good weekend. Yes, again. Tune in next time, and we will see you next week.